Hi, everybody. On this week's film study, we're going to talk about the Ohio State defense. Last week, we went over the 32-31 loss to the Oregon Ducks. Close last-minute, back-and-forth battle with lots of offense. Both units dictating for both the Ducks and the Buckeye offenses, putting on a good display. But that's obviously led to a lot of questions about the Ohio State defense. Now, much of that discussion this week and in the past 2 weeks really is focused on the lack of pass rush. In my opinion, that's a secondary issue. And what we're going to discuss today is we're going to go over the lack of disguise and how Ohio State has been, or how they telegraphed what they've been doing defensively, how Oregon was able to pick it apart, manipulate it. Now, that's a problem not because of these specific tactics, whether it was this zone or that zone scheme. They, in fact, actually have been running a lot of cover four quarters, more zone defenses, both last year and the early part of this year leading into the Oregon game. Now, against the Ducks, however, the big mismatch was that Jim Knowles called for a ton of man coverage. That was a big change from what Ohio State's done for the last year and a half. Much more they had done in 2020, 21, 22, Knowles' first year here. Obviously going back to the pass regime, even all the way back to Jeff Hafley. But they'd been a zone team the last couple of years. Again, there's no right or wrong answer. Man is a good answer against RPO teams. However, if it's telegraphed and the offense knows that you're running man, they can manipulate and dictate where the defense goes and still be successful. And that's what we saw. Now we're going to go into a little bit of what that looks like and why the Oregon offense was able to manipulate what the defense was doing. And then we'll get into some possible solutions, because the good news for Ohio State fans is the answers are already in the playbook. They don't have to throw out the scheme. They don't have to start over. The answers are already there. It's a question of whether they will use them, because they're going to face a very similar RPO scheme that's going to manipulate what the defense does, not this weekend against Nebraska, but more so in a week and a half against Penn State when they go to Happy Valley. That's a new offense with Andy Kotelnicki from formerly of Kansas. Very good at using formation to manipulate what the defense is doing, just as we saw from the Oregon Ducks. So with that, let's dig in and see a little bit more of what I think at least some of the issues have been with Ohio State's defense, specifically against Oregon. All right, so we've talked about man coverage here. Why would you run man coverage? Because you have better athletes. That's simply why. You've got athletes that when they are in coverage man on man, they're able to track and follow those receivers. They've got the athleticism, which Ohio State does. There's no question about it. The problem is when you get into games like this where the talent mismatch is not so great, it's easier for the offense to dictate where the defense goes. What do I mean by that? Well, if you look at the top of the screen here, what we have is man coverage between the safety and the tight end. With the free safety, Caleb Downs, lined up all the way up top, that is a signal to the quarterback that they're in man coverage, because otherwise he'd be somewhere over here, right? Here's the other safety. But the fact that he is out here on the edge, right, that is a signal to the quarterback. This is going to be man coverage. And of course, that's what we get. Now, as we progress the play here and we see where they go, you can watch Downs follow that tight end all the way across on this shallow crosser. It's a third down play. Ohio State sends pressure up the middle. They've got a fifth rusher in the form of Cody Simon. You can see him coming off the right side here. They get some pressure. Gabriel has to force the ball out. Great play from Downs to wrap his arm around without committing a PI and breaking up the play. If you've got the athletes to do this, there's no reason why you wouldn't want to run man coverage. The problem, of course, goes back to how you line up, because when you've got somebody like a tight end out here on the top and you've got the free safety is lined up all the way out wide following, that is a signal to the offense. I can dictate where the defense is going to go, which is exactly what Oregon did all night against Ohio State. Here's another example of what I mean by the offense being able to dictate. Now, they're going to use some funky formations, which really puts those defenders in conflict, and especially when you're able to do this in the run game, that messes up the defense's run fits. Now, let's watch the play, what happens. They line up really quick. Ohio State's still trying to get lined up. It's just a handoff along the left side. Jordan James breaks a tackle. There's nobody there, picks up a huge game. It would set up a touchdown a few plays later, right? We watch it from the back end. Again, it seems like there's nobody there. It's that bubble that everyone talked about, between the nose tackle and the defensive end. So what actually happened here? Yes, right? We watched the end zone view here. Yes, there is a big bubble right here. They're clearly trying to attack it with a mid-zone run through that. But I want you to look at who else is here, right? And if we zoom back out, we can go back and we can say, okay, well, Ohio State's a man coverage. Why do we know this? Well, we've got this corner here. We can see the other corner is traveling, which, Igbinosun isn't going to come from the other side of the field unless he's got that guy in coverage, which he clearly does. And now the biggest killer, and this is the biggest tell from Oregon's perspective, they've got their slot receiver lined up here almost like a fullback, and there's Jordan Hancock lined up in the box. Because there's no other receivers outside, we've got this tight end who's in he's at the end of the line here, a nub formation as you call it. He would be matched up on this linebacker, Sonny Styles. And as a result, the safeties are saying, well, wait a second, we don't have anything to do, so we're going to stay lined up too high because that's what we should do. Now they're talking to each other. It's possible they were trying to make a check to move the run fit, whatever. But as they're lining up, as the play is starting, Jordan Hancock, over that slot receiver who is lined up in the backfield, is part of the run fit. What do I mean by the run fit? Well, everybody has gap responsibilities here, right? So as we look at who that is, everybody's got one gap. So the nose has this gap. 3 technique has that gap. Jack Sawyer's got the edge. Sonny Styles has this C gap. And Simon might have here because he thinks Hancock's going to fill that gap. Okay, theoretically, there's a guy in every gap, right? Well, watch what happens as soon as the play starts. Because when 15 takes off and goes this way, look who follows him, because he's got him in man coverage. Hancock immediately, because he's a defensive back and that's a wide receiver, he knows that I'm responsible for that man in coverage, which means that suddenly this gap is lacking a defender, right? Simon can try to gap here. He can try to read it, and that's what he does. He makes a good effort, and he actually ends up splitting, this double team. They both whiff on him, but he's putting so much effort into that he's only able to get a hand on Jordan James. What you'd love to have is Hancock filling this gap, Simon filling that gap, Ty Hamilton filling that gap, JT out here on the edge. Suddenly, the fundamental function of your run defense is much more sound. You've got a hat in every hole, right? You now are gapped out, as coaches will call it, meaning you've got a defender for everywhere the ball carrier can go. If you are playing a man defense like this, as Ohio State seemed to do all night, which again was a change-up from how they've been playing for the last year and a half, you are reliant on your playmakers, typically somebody up front, defeating a double team, beating one of these guys. And again, Simon makes a great effort to try to break and get through, but he puts his effort into that and was only able to lunge and make an arm tackle at a really good running back. And then, of course, there's nobody here because we've also got, because of the tempo Oregon used, we've got Caleb Downs who's leading the middle of the field, and we've got Lathan Ransom. They're both playing the same free safety spot because, again, look at where or how quickly Oregon snapped the ball. As the ball snapped, they're still talking to each other in the back, in the secondary here. So the tempo the offense used, they were dictating how Ohio State was not only lining up, but they were manipulating everything that they're trying to do defensively with their run fits. And a lot of that had to do with the man coverage, trying to get lined up perfectly so you have the right personnel over the right personnel on the offensive side. Now, I wish it was as simple as Ohio State should just stop playing man coverage and only play quarters, play zone as they've done for the majority of the season and most of last season. However, against good teams that are well coached, which Oregon certainly is, and there are others on the schedule, we'll talk about Penn State and others, they're going to manipulate that. No matter what you do, if you aren't disguising what you're doing in coverage and what you're trying to do defensively, there are offenses out here that are not just going to pick it up from their pregame scouting, but thanks to the iPads they're able to review during games, they have the answers already. They're able to make those adjustments on the fly. So a good example, Ohio State came out in the second half and they started playing a lot more zone. They got manipulated by that man coverage, as we discussed. They were getting moved around too easily in the run game. So they started playing their quarters again. That's what we see. We see, right, we've got 4 deep defenders, right? You can tell they're in zone. And they're not matching up personnel-wise because we've got 3 Oregon receivers down here, right? And the nickelback, Jordan Hancock, he's lined up like an inside linebacker. The reason for that, Ohio State would align him to the wide side of the field. They would align the secondary to the field so that there's more space to cover. We want a faster guy. We want an extra guy. Again, there's 11 players on the field. If you split it in half, one side's going to have more players than the other. You want that on the wider side of the field. Oregon recognized this and instantly loaded up and put. They put their formation to the boundary because that would bring Sonny Styles, one of the linebackers, out here into the flat. He's got to cover in case they run some type of bubble screen or something quick along with that. And all that Oregon had to do then was say, great, now we've got a nickel back in the fit, and we can just run it right to his side. Now watch what happens when they run this ball here, because again, here's Jordan Hancock. He is now responsible because of this alignment that Oregon was easily able to recognize and call the right formation to manipulate. He's got to fill this gap. And that means that as this lineman who's just running a zone play is coming up on him, he's got a 300-pound guard who's going to chip and come right up on him. Jordan Hancock's a really good football player. He's going to play on Sundays. He does not want to be, and nor is it in his best interest or Ohio State's best interest, to be taking on guards inside the box. That's just not good football, and it's not going to help you win games. Now, luckily, Ohio State had answers in the playbook already, and I think that's the takeaway I want everyone to have. The answers are there. It's simply about disguising and not being so reactive to what the offense is doing. Now, they noticed what Oregon was picking up on, how they were aligning. So as we get, again, later into the game, we've got another 3 receivers into the boundary, right? And so Ohio State now, they realize, all right, we're going to send Jordan Hancock over there. We don't want him lining up in the box. So even as they're getting ready, you can see Styles, of course, he's coming over to get lined up just before this play starts. Now, that's not the only difference. Yes, we get motion coming to this side, and so Styles bumps out a little bit, right? He's playing a little bit wider. But what we see is definitely something different with the front and the way that Jim Knowles asks his defense to defend the run. We even get a little motion here. Watch Jordan James. He's going to flip sides, which is, at the very last minute, he's basically saying instead of being lined up to run to the right side and take the handoff in front of the quarterback, I'm going to flip it around, right? And I'm going to take it that way. But this time, when he takes the handoff, he kind of gets stuffed, right? There's nowhere for him to run. And why does this happen? Because what the defense is doing, what the defensive line is doing, they're playing we call spill technique, right? And what that means is that the defensive line is actually going to be pinching. So we got the nose tackles in that A gap. The 3 tech is going to come around and try to fill the opposite A gap. The defensive ends are going to try to pinch in. They're going to try to cross the face of those tackles. And what they're trying to do is just muck up everything in the middle to force the ball carrier outside. Watch what happens, right? We just get this big mass of humanity right here in the middle. There's nowhere for a back to go. Every running back on the planet's going to say, I want to go out here. That's where I can find room to run, right? Now, what the defense is doing is saying we are trying to spill it because we want to kill it, because we can see, oh, there's bodies here all of a sudden. We go back up top. Again, we've got pinch, 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 pinch. James is going to take it and then bounce it outside, because as the play progresses, what do you have? Instead of Sonny Styles trying to fill an interior gap, his job is to fill the outside. Jordan Hancock is to fill the outside. And because of this giant mass of humanity that was created by the pinch, Cody Simon can just mirror him. And so even though James, they're able to get a body on on Styles, Simon's there to clean up, right? Now watch it from this angle. You can see Jordan Hancock is there in case the quarterback keeps. You're going to get Styles along the outside, and that allows Simon to basically go unblocked and mirror the running back and be there to make a tackle when the time comes, right? He comes untouched, able to clean up, spill and kill. It's a great technique. We saw it a ton from Jim Knowles when he was at Oklahoma State. Ohio State has run it a lot, as we'll show in a second. It's not about one technique being better. That's not that this is better than containing the run, where your defensive ends run just straight up upfield and try to box the run, as some people say, even cage it. What you're trying to do is just try to disguise what your intention is. That's really the game we're playing here. It's not about the call in the huddle. It's about not revealing what that is until the ball is snapped. Now, I think one of the more frustrating parts for Ohio State fans is, if you've been paying attention, you've been reading film studies for a while, you know that Ohio State's had this in the bag for a long time. And the disguise element, it's something that they've done successfully. For some reason, it just wasn't in the game plan at Oregon. So the answers are theoretically there, but it's on the coaching staff to do a better job of disguising it. Now, this is the 3 safety look that we all expected from Jim Knowles, right? We got 1, 2, 3, of course. Styles was a safety last year, so don't get confused when you see number 6. He's going to be playing a lot of linebacker-like duties. Now, what I want you to imagine is that that's Caleb Downs this year. He's playing that spot in this defense. From the quarterback's perspective, it looks like I've got 3 high. There's a lot that the defense can be doing with that. Maybe they're playing some version of, cover. They're playing quarters, right? You've got quarters over the top, quarters, quarters, quarters. Maybe we've got some type of 3 cloud, right? Quarter, deep third. Maybe it's some type of quarter, half, right? There's so much that the defense could be doing from this look. It's unclear. What they end up playing is they're playing a version of Tampa 2. So you've got 2 deep, and then you've got the corners pressed up, which is really important because that can help you in run defense. And we're going to see that on this play against Penn State. Now, what Penn State's going to do is they're just going to give a handoff. It's a counter play, gets pushed outside, and actually Davidson Igbinosun's going to make the tackle. Watch it from this view. Again, this is that spill and kill. You're going to see here, coming across. You're going to see JT trying to, come across the tackle's face. We can see the D-line trying to do that everywhere, right? Now, this is actually a counter, so we've got 2 pullers. We've got the center trying to pull across, and we've got the backside tackle. And what ends up happening here, Jack Sawyer, because he's pinching down so quickly, he meets the center quickly before he can even really kick it out. And then Steele Chambers is there to fill, right? There's our spill. And then from up top, now this is the key, is you're getting help from your defensive back. Because of this middle safety here, Sonny Styles, he's able to get an eye and be that extra player. What we just saw Cody Simon do from the middle linebacker spot against Oregon, Sonny Styles, as the middle safety in this look last year, is doing the exact same role, right? He's the middle guy. He's able to mirror the back. But even more helpful is we've got help coming from the side from this corner because he's got a hard flat, Davison Igbinosun. This is what the Chicago Bears, the Tampa Bay Bucks did in the early 2000s with this Tampa 2 defense. Watch from up top again, right? We're going to see pinches. We're going to see the outside linebackers. In this case, you had Tommy Eichenberg, who's lined up in a slot. The offense might be thinking hey, that's kind of advantageous. We better run the ball. The middle linebackers outside the tackle box. But then you have Styles who can read and mirror. And then even more importantly, you've got that corner, especially to the boundary, who's able to come and insert in the run game. Watch it one more time. You can just see it's disguised. Penn State doesn't know what's coming. And now you've still got bodies. You're playing a conservative zone passing coverage, but you have bodies against the run. They're doing a better job disguising it in this game. They did a great job against Penn State last year, something we'll talk about in a second. But this is what I think was so frustrating. Where was this disguise? Where were these extra schemes against Oregon? Now, I think the deeper issue to investigate here is why Ohio State didn't do such a good job of disguising. And I think part of that is, the scar tissue from especially 2 seasons ago, 2022, Jim Knowles' first. That Michigan game, they got burned for big plays, but they'd been burned for big plays all year round. Last season, they did a much better job of containing those big plays, but they were much more conservative defensively. That's what we've seen throughout much of this season. They're capable of doing more to disguise, and we can see it in this play against Oregon. But I think because it didn't work, it was poorly executed, that justified not doing more disguise in the future when that's exactly what Oregon probably needed. They needed to keep going back to this well. Now, what do I mean by that? What we can see right from the way this is aligned, this is a 3rd and long. We can see the safety in the middle of the field. We can see the linebackers mugged up like they're going to rush. We've got Caleb Downs here lined up like he's going to rush. And it looks like that man coverage we showed, right? We've got one, we've got the nickel, we've got the outside. We've even got a safety over the tight end. That sure looks like man coverage to everybody on the planet, except as the ball is snapped, Ohio State's going to drop into a cover 2, right? You're going to get the safeties. We've got the free safety Hancock. Ransom's going to drop out. And then we've got cover 2, got a good job matching. Simon recognizes and he follows. This guy's going to follow here. I think these are various variations of coverage here. But because this is a unique personnel in that Lorenzo Styles, who doesn't play a ton, he hasn't played a ton this far, he's the opposite nickelback. He's lined up here in the slot and doesn't do a great job in this cover 2 zone. Either he doesn't have the call right or he thinks something else is happening, but he actually moves inside, right? You can see him start to drift this way when what's going to happen is you're just going to get a quick out from his guy while this receiver is just running a fade ball, which takes the corner with him. There's a ton of free space there. It's an easy throw for Gabriel. Turns out to be a first down. Now, sure, it looks like that was a bad call because they attacked the spot that was wide open. The hard part about that is it certainly looked as though that was played properly. It looked like it was a good call. Styles just did not play it properly. And that's not a reason not to try to disguise, right? Just because this one play did not work one time does not mean that it's a bad play that's never going to work. We didn't see this much more from Ohio State the rest of the night. It seemed like they were spooked because, you know what, if you can't line up over the guy, you're not going to be square and you're not going to be there to make a play. And I think that fear of giving up the big play allowed them to give up so many smaller plays. Now, the reason they gave up those deep balls was really just technique-based. Denzel Burke got beat one-on-one a couple times, right? That has nothing to do with the scheme. It was just a one-on-ones that he lost. These types of plays, though, really are about scheme. And yes, we had a guy that doesn't play a lot, not executing properly. That doesn't mean you can't try it again with other personnel. So it seemed like Jim Knowles and the defensive staff just got a little too skittish, but the answers are there, and there's no reason for them to be on that conservative side of the spectrum. Now, again, we know that this 3 safety look, even though we haven't seen it a lot this year, it does exist still for this season's playbook with Jim Knowles. We can see here against Michigan State just a few weeks back. This is, again, it's a 3rd and long, but this is a look that I think Ohio State should consider playing more on early downs. Why? Because you're going to see, of course, all 5 DBs, not just the safeties. They're all lined up on the first down marker, right? It's a 10 yards to go, and they're all lined up deep here. But you're not giving away the coverage as we just went over. Instead, what we're going to have is we're going to have a 3 deep. And again, it's not about which coverage, because there's a lot of coverages you can run. They all have good points. They all have bad points. This one, I think, particularly for Ohio State and the way they've been attacked is interesting, though, because it's what we call a 3 buzz strong, right? We've got our 3 deep, as you can see. But if we go back, what we've got here is we've got Jordan Hancock, who can take the flat. We've got Caleb Downs here, who's in a buzz. We've got Cody Simon, who's in a zone. We've got Sonny Styles to the boundary in a zone. That's your 4 under. Why is that important? Because you've got all these receivers to the top here. Now imagine this was 1st and 10. That's a great RPO look where you can have a screen to the top while running inside. And if you're lining up and you are rolling your coverage that way, so you've got Downs and Hancock over the top, some people call it 3 buzz strong, 3 Mabel. You're rolling your DBs while you're then leaving, right, your 2 inside linebackers to be there and run coverage. So you don't have that issue of Jordan Hancock in the box taking on a 300-pound lineman. You're able to do a good job of matching up personnel where you'd rather it be, right? But you're still disguising it versus just lining up Hancock and Downs in this spot. You're using that 3 safety structure because who's to say that you couldn't have the corner come down? And then you've got Downs over the top and Hancock in that role. So you're able to mix that up by not showing it too much ahead of the time. These are things that Ohio State, again, has in the toolbox. Love to see more of them. So I think one of the most, again, the frustrating parts about watching that Oregon tape back and the lack of disguise that we saw is that we know that it's possible with this staff. A lot of the same players that were on the field in Eugene are going to be on the field this weekend for the Ohio State defense and, in 2 weeks against Penn State and Happy Valley. Now, this is a great example of the game last year. It's a 3rd and long. It's a pressure package. We know everyone's focused on getting that pass rush. Why is it, lacking this season? Well, there are packages that work, that get pressure on the quarterback and force these incompletions, right? Even if they're not sacks, they're getting you out of 3rd and long. They're getting the ball back, forcing the punt team out there. Now, what are we seeing here is what we've got is the coverage is divided in half. The 3 guys to the left side, from the centered left, and from the right guard right, including the running back, they're dividing the pass coverage. So when Tommy Eichenberg shows up here, right, when he's coming up here, that means that the left side, they've got to take those 3 guys, and the right side are going to take those 3 guys. But Ohio State's going to attack that. They know that's coming. Eichenberg's going to come across the face of the center. We're going to get pressure here. Cody Simon's going to come around. Mike Hall's going to come in. We're actually going to see Kenyatta Jackson show and then drop into a zone coverage, like a zone blitz. But then the key, of course, is going to be Tuimoloau on that right side. He's going to feign like he's coming, and then he's coming across, right? So we've got these 3 guys that are stepping out, assuming they've got, their 3. And in fact, what's happening is Ohio State's attacking the middle, where right up the seam, and that allows Tuimoloau to get there. And again, the answers are in the playbook. Ohio State has them at their disposal. We've seen them before. We know that they can execute this because we've seen a lot of the same players with the same staff. when you don't have the talent mismatch that's as great as it was for Ohio State against Marshall or Western Michigan, and that mismatch against a team like Penn State and certainly against Oregon we saw is much smaller. You can't just line up and try to go mano a mano. I know people want to play tough guy football, but this is why scheme matters in games like that when the talent edge is so minimal. It's why it's so important in the NFL. And when you get these helmet games like we're going to have for Ohio State, like against Penn State, like we just had 2 weeks ago, the schematic piece is important. And right now, disguise is the most important piece that whether you're an offensive or a defensive coach, you have to bring to the table.